number of unusual political and economic situations due to increased integration of global markets. These spillovers of shock, positive or negative, are almost immediately affecting the world. Thus, every economic, political, or pandemic impacts most of the macroeconomic variables. So, conventional macroeconomic policy may not help us in understanding and addressing such situations, primarily because the uncertainties in the political outcomes. So, our seminar coordinator actually specializes in macroeconomic issues. So she'll be able to talk more about it in the concept note that she's going to present for the seminar. I hope we all have a very fruitful deliberation and discussion during the day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Manisha ma'am. So I just want to speak a few words on why contours of modern macroeconomic policy. Basically, when I just thought about this seminar, we have a one-stop store at Dr. Niranjan Rajadiksha. And so I spoke to him, and he also helped me out in finally deciding the title. And basically, I was very much concerned about how suddenly these shocks have been coming, and then we keep on debating what kind of shock it is and how policy has to react to it. So I'll just read out a few lines on what are my thoughts about it. So in the last few years, there has been this unprecedented rise in uncertainty in policy making, which has been triggered by a string of external events like macroeconomic and monetary spillovers, climate change, geopolitical dynamics, and of course, we had the pandemic. We also have this looming problem of artificial intelligence, which is going to come up in the next few days and is going to eat away most of the jobs. So that's going to hit the employment. These turbulent episodes make prediction and forecasting of future macroeconomic variables very difficult and push economic policy making into uncharted territories because policy making is effective in an environment which may where prediction if it is easy to predict, it is easy to have a good policy. And with this new consensus macroeconomics around and growing importance of expectation in policy making, it becomes very, very difficult to actually predict macro variables. Exceptional policies attempting to address the economic distress caused by such unforeseen events pave the way for recovery in the near term, but in many situations they become the genesis for another major economic crisis of much larger magnitude. The frequency with which governments are forced to or expected to change policy under such circumstances has a cost, which is the anticipation about future conduct of policy gets altered, and then there's a lot of chaos in various markets. Thus, in the absence of historical regularities, the need of the hour is to crystallize our thoughts for future guidance and face these unending strings of challenges which are coming up. So, the broad themes around which our seminar would revolve today are like this. So we will be discussing about international monetary spillover. So this has been taken from the great normalization of interest rates in the last few months or in the last 1 year by the US. The zero lower bound and stabilization policy, which was slightly prior to this situation, the dynamics of growth, and of course the issues relating to unemployment. So today we have amongst ourselves some of the finest academicians and policymakers who will deliberate upon these issues through the course of the day and enable us to view the dynamics of prominent macroeconomic variables through the lens of uncertainty. In the process, we will also be able to exchange views on the challenges to policy making and crystallize our ideas on what works and how for India these uncertain times are going to be handled. With this brief introduction, we now come over to the first part of our program, and that is the inaugural entry. Um, I would request Manisha ma'am to welcome guests with a memento, our chairperson, and so and our keynote speaker, Professor Nachne. Is the keynote speaker for the session. And Professor Ronak Korea is the chairperson for this session. I would like to request Ms. Arpita to introduce our chairperson and the keynote speaker for this session. Arpita has joined us recently as a fellow in the department. Good morning and warm welcome to esteemed chair speakers, our respected teachers and their students. It is indeed an honor for me to introduce Professor Korea sir. Professor Korea sir is an alumnus and a former director of the Mumbai School of Economics and Public Policy. He was an RBI chair professor of monetary economics and a UGC national fellow at the department. He was awarded Professor P.R. Bhanananda Memorial Research Grant Award, was a French government postdoctoral scholar. He was a recipient of the Open Merit Scholarship at our department and has also received a host of other scholarships during his entire academic career. Besides our department, Professor Korea is associated with the Central University of Hyderabad, Center for Advanced Studies, Dalapur University, Institute of South Asian Studies, National University of Singapore, and Maison des Sciences at Paris. Professor Korea is a member of the subgroup on the floor Private Investment to Agriculture for the 11th Five-Year Plan, was a member of the Working Group on Money Supply in 1998, and has also worked for the National Transportation Planning and Automation Center for developing comprehensive traffic and transportation plan for Trivandrum in Calicut. He has written immensely in legal journalism and continues to do so, has published books, contributed chapters, and presented his findings across the world. Professor Konversar is also a member of the International Board of Editors of the journal Macroeconomics and Finance in Emerging Market Economies. I extend my warm welcome to you, sir. I now introduce Professor Dilip Nachne, sir. Again, it's indeed a great privilege for me to introduce Professor sir. With a distinguished career spanning decades in academia, research, and policy making, Professor Nachne sir brings a wealth of experience and expertise. Professor sir is one of our highly esteemed alumni, having studied here for his master's and PhD, having taught here, and also headed the department as a director from 1993-1999. Served the Chancellor of the Central University of Manipur and has been associated with the Indian Council of Social Sciences, Institute of South Asian Studies, Indian School of Political Economy, and was the director at the IGIDR from 2007 to 2010. Sir was a senior Fulbright Fellow, University of Texas, senior Halsworth Fellow, University of Manchester, Jean Monnet Fellow, European University Institute, visiting senior fellow at NUS Singapore, and ESRC Fellow, London School of Economics. He has taught at several institutions abroad, some of them being the University of British Columbia, University of Ulster, UK, University of Avignon, France, and European University Institute, Italy. Philippe Sir was a member of PN's Economic Advisory Council from 2012 to 2014 and has had prestigious appointments and memberships in various official bodies shaping dialogues and advancing knowledge. The National Stock Exchange of India, Bombay Stock Exchange, BNP Paribas, SBI, Technical Advisory Committee on Monetary Policy, Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation of India. As an editor-in-chief of the Journal of Quantitative Economics, editor of Macroeconomics and Finance and Emerging Market Economies, and being a member of the editorial board of several notable journals and research governments, Professor Sir has played a pivotal role in shaping academic discourse and fostering intellectual exchange in the academic community.
So it has published extensively with over 88 papers in research journals, 19 articles in various edited volumes and anthologies, 9 books, and a host of working papers, conference papers, and delivered distinguished lectures across the country and the world. Such is his academic excellence and intellectual prowess that many of his own PhD students have gone on to become directors of our own departments, such as Dr. Karnik, Dr. Korea, Dr. Hardikus. I extend a warm welcome to you, sir. And I now hand over the mic to Professor Ma.
I now hand over the mic to Romal sir, who's chairing this session.
Thank you, Anuradha. Thank you, Manisha, the School of Economics, for the invitation. Thanks for confirming for me that the title was not inspired by The Age of Uncertainty by John Kenneth Galbraith, a book he wrote in 1977. Galbraith was a maverick, anti-establishment, anti-monopoly capital. He made an early case for new socialism, steeply progressive income taxation, for planning in a place no less than the United States of America. So you just confirmed for me that the title is not from Galbraith's book. I was here last for a review of Professor Nachne's book on macroeconomics. None of us were surprised to have our socks knocked off. It was a tour de force of scholarship. For my part, all I could connect with was one page of that book, which I spent all my professional life looking at very closely, the macroeconomics of Mikhail Kalecki, the Polish economist. So you can imagine my jaw dropping and my eyes blinking when I came across reference to a Kalecki-Levy model. I've never heard of a Kalecki-Levy model. I dare say no Kaleckian scholars have heard of a Kalecki-Levy model. Who, pray, is Levy? And naturally, my interest was piqued, and I dug and delved, and I thought I could add another name to it too. And there was an equation and a diagram, and a quadrant or two or three to the diagram. And this Shishya had the effrontery of posing the problem to his guru, saying that either he addressed it or the Shishya would fill the breach and work on the problem. Professor Nachne evidently dismissed my invitation, and it turned out very generously and kindly so, because I did look closely at it, and I was very proud of the outcome in a paper that appeared, which subsequently came up in a chapter in the book. Not one more to my long list of gets to Nachne. I feel the same air of anticipation and expectations today. The title of his lecture is divided into 3 parts: financial stability, liquidity traps, plural, and credit deadlocks, not credit rationing. Now, each of these are deadly serious economic problems that can be treated independently. But who better than Dilip Nachne to fuse them in his own manner? Professor Nachne.
Dr. Omar Korea, Dr. Manisha Karnaik, who is the director of the department, Dr. Patnaik, many friends here. Okay. Niranjan is there, Ritu Diwan is there, Neil Deshpande is there, so many others. Okay. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. Now, about the genesis of this paper. You see, this paper will be published in a special volume in honor of Dr. Rangarajan. Okay. Dr. Rangarajan completed his 90 years
Shalini,
a month back,
Shalini,
and couple of months back. And there is a special issue, the Indian
Okay.
economy to be brought out.
ആ പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ടുപോകണ്ടേ?
My purpose was twofold in accepting the invitation. One was my great regard of Professor Rangarajan.
നമ്മുടെ നമുക്ക് നമ്മുടെ ബുക്ക് കൊണ്ടുപോകണം കുടുംബശ്രീ.
Other was that it gave me an opportunity to revive my contact.
വേറൊന്നുമില്ലല്ലോ അതില് കൊണ്ടുവരാത്തത് വേറൊന്നും വല്ലതുണ്ടോ?
I read it for a long time.
ഡയറക്റ്റ് കൊണ്ടുവരാൻ അവർക്ക് സ്റ്റോക്ക് ഉണ്ടോന്ന് അറിയില്ലല്ലോ. അൺറോൾഡ്
The joint editor for the Indian for about 15 years.
ചോദിച്ചു നോക്കൂ, ആരാണ് സുജൻ എടുത്താണോ?
That apart,
ചോദിക്കൂ, നിങ്ങൾക്ക് ഏതെങ്കിലും ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് പെട്ടെന്ന് അറിയിക്കും. ഞങ്ങൾ ഇവിടുന്ന് കുടുംബശ്രീ ബുക്ക് കൊണ്ടുവരുന്നുണ്ട്.
see what exactly is the role of money?
അപ്പൊ 10 മണിക്ക് എന്റെ വീട്ടിൽ വരാൻ
That
പറ്റുമോ?
is something.
10:30
that
തുടങ്ങും.
has been
10:30
ZLB need not act as a barrier. ZLB can be penetrated. The zero lower bound can be penetrated. You can have negative interest rates. Now this is very familiar stuff. The basic problem with lower and longer interest rate is that it makes currency more attractive to hold than bonds. And the liquidity offered by currency outweighs the low interest rate on bonds. When the rate of interest is very low, say 0.5%, people tend to hold currency because currency has certain advantages over bonds. Okay? You see, you have some money in your pocket, you can easily spend it. Okay, but if you have a bond in your pocket to the same amount, it can be difficult to tap and its liquidity is lower. Okay. So one possibility is, and this was suggested by Jessel. I think this is a Swede. Norwegian anyway, he was a Scandinavian economist. Jessel was to tax currency. In a low interest rate environment. If you tax currency, then currency will become less attractive to hold, and that will balance out currency holding vis-a-vis bond holdings. Okay, and I have given an example here. Suppose the rate of interest has gone down to minus 0.5%. Then if you tax, if you have a penalty on currency holdings amounting to say minus 0.75%. Okay, then the situation could be averting. Okay, you have a slight disadvantage to currency holdings vis-a-vis bond holdings, right? Now, how do we levy a tax on currency holdings? Okay, the mechanics of it was nicely worked out by Jason. He said they put stamps on the currency notes. Okay, in those days, currency notes were quite big, at least the big currency note. So you can keep on adding small stamps there. Okay, so once the currency becomes 6 months old, you put a stamp. Once it becomes 12 months old, you put another stamp. So that is the thing. Now, this and sometimes, and some of the modern people have said, why do you need stamps? In these days, we replace it with magnetic strips. So that can also be done. Okay, that can also be done. Okay. So the main idea here is that when you have a currency note, you just know how many practical alternatives is demonetization of large notes. You see, what happens is, we are small holders of currency. I mean, and now with this ATM and all that, most of us are using electronic money. Still, we need currency. We are small holders of currency. But whether it happened in Europe, just before the euro currency in 97 or something like that, people are holding the alternate market or the black market. Okay, there is a lot of currency holdings, and all these currency holdings, it is inconvenient to hold them in small notes. If you want to hold 1 crore in 1 rupee notes, that would be impossible. But you can hold 1 crore rupees in 1,000 rupee notes, or if 10,000 rupee notes are there. So that's why you demonetize the large notes. Now we have had our experience with demonetization. In a largely rural economy, and with a important farm sector, okay, there is likely to be a great deal of inconvenience attached to demonetization. Our colleague Neeraj Hakekar, I think, had an article in EPW on the presence of demonetization and how it affected the people in the villages and so on. So that is The other alternative, and this is the last one that I consider under this category, is to have a dual currency. Dual currency. This was proposed by Eisler in 1932 and later on, extended by Kenneth Rogoff and others. The currency, in most countries, two types of currencies circulate side by side, paper currency and all this electronic money. Electronic money. According to this proposal, the government should declare that all government contract, taxes and fees will be dominated in electronic currency. Will be dominated in electronic currency, though payable in both types of currency. You see, so you are going to collect taxes and fees and so on in, by credit card and ATM and so on. But if you want, you can pay in currency. You want, you can pay in currency. But the prices of the two money supplies, I may use that included, two money supplies are different. Okay? It is cheaper. It is cheaper. Electronic money is cheaper. And there is a rate of exchange between electronic money and currency. So this proposal, some people have studied it very seriously, Rogoff, Kenneth Rogoff, so on. Okay. Now, if you ask my own opinion, I'm not very much for these measures. I've discussed them for the sake of completeness, but I don't think, except for demonetization to some extent, okay, if it is done very carefully. Otherwise, I think these measures run the risk. Now, let us consider the methods. I don't know how much time I have. 15 minutes. The other possibility dealing with the liquidity trap, that is, those suggestions which are based on the liquidity trap. And we all know about Keynes' liquidity trap. Okay, the liquidity correction can be so on. Okay. One very practical suggestion in this category is revise the inflation target. Revise the inflation target, and this has been suggested by Bernanke, Blanchard and Fisher and others, group of American economists. Please don't forget that Bernanke was the Federal Reserve Governor at that time when this crisis broke out. According to this suggestion, the announced inflation target by the central bank, you see the central bank in India also it announces a target, I think 4% to 5% of the bank. Okay, so what you do is you raise the inflation target. You raise the inflation target. Once you raise the inflation target, then what will happen? This so what happens is, once this is raised, the announced inflation target becomes higher. The logic for this seems to be to give more room for the central bank to react to an adverse shock. Right? Once the inflation target is revised, then the central bank, you see the central bank, I don't know how seriously it takes the target. Okay? But see, when you are in a deep recession, okay, when you are in a deep recession, you want to take some measures. You want to take some measures to promote the economy. In the process, there is always a danger of inflation. Always a danger of inflation. You see, inflation is a dangerous disease. It can crop up anytime. So what do? If the target is low, then the central bank is obliged to maintain that target. Obliged or at least morally bound to maintain that target. The target is easier. It gives the central bank more flexibility to deal with that, the target. Okay, so that is one possibility. The other thing is to replace inflation targeting by what is called as price gap targeting. Okay. Instead of, you see, what is inflation targeting? You say that I want, central bank wants inflation between 4% to 6%. Okay. Now, instead of saying that, okay, you say that you want a price gap target. That is, prices, absolute level of price. Suppose you take the index number. Suppose the index number currently is, I'm just taking out 157. 157. You will say that I want the price level, okay, to be, say, 170. You are dividing the target, 170. But you take a price gap, the actual price minus the price that you want. So what is the advantage of the price gap as opposed to the inflation target? Inflation target, suppose you don't achieve inflation target for 1 year. You start next year on a fresh slate. But if you miss the price gap target, the price gap will accumulate for the next year. Will accumulate for the next year. Okay? Right? So it is carried forward. It is carried forward, and that's why it is more effective. Then, of course, reducing the long-term interest rate, reducing the long-term, that can be done by what is called an operation twist. That sometimes the US has been doing it very frequently. RBI has also engaged in an operation twist, where you buy short-dated securities from the market and sell, long-dated securities. Okay, so that way the long-term rate is reduced. Okay. Then, of course, you have fiscal stimulus. You have fiscal stimulus. You have fiscal stimulus, and Keynes, as you know, was a very big advocate of fiscal stimuli, okay, fiscal policy. Now, there was a difference of opinion between Hawtrey, and that is not brought out, correctly here. Hawtrey was against, see, in the 1930s, when Keynes was writing the treatise and other, Keynes was always for fiscal policy. But Hawtrey was a long time associate of the Treasury in UK. And the Treasury had taken the view, whether it was at Hawtrey's insistence or whether it was an independent view, that public works should not be undertaken. Their view was this, Hawtrey's view was about public work was like this, about fiscal policy. That if you undertake fiscal policy with taxes, then it will displace an equivalent amount of private investment. This is the crowding out here, theory. But note that Hawtrey made it much, much earlier. Okay. Secondly, he said that if you finance the deficit through bonds, people will expect a higher deficit in the future and interest burden. So they will be prepared for more taxes. Okay. And that will affect their expectation. So that is our regarding equivalent. Okay. Finally, okay, if you finance the fiscal deficit by deficit financing, then it will have the intended effect. Then it will be expansionary. But then Hawtrey says it is expansionary not because of fiscal stimulus. It is because of the increase in money supply. You see, it is not the fiscal policy per se, which is raising, which is expansionary. It is the increased money supply associated with this. Then there are many other proposals. One is currency depreciation. Okay, well, I don't favor currency depreciation that much. Because you see, currency, if you make unilateral currency depreciation, as China has been doing for so long, okay, there are repercussions. Okay, the repercussions, the IMF will object, other countries will object, and so on. And there is Swenson's foolproof strategy. I am, for want of time, I just mention what this is. an upward sloping price level target, a depreciation and a crawling peg of the currency, but an exit strategy. We say that, look here, see, by this particular date, we are going to exit from this strategy. That means it will become more credible. It becomes more credible. This is mentioned. But the most interesting and most successful has been quantitative easing. Has been quantitative easing. Now, what exactly is quantitative easing? Now, I don't go into the details of how this quantitative easing was actually done. I will only go into that. Now, how is this related to Hartree's concept of credit deadlock? Okay. Now, I've given a very detailed discussion here, but for the purposes of this lecture, I'll only say that credit deadlock means that entrepreneurs are not willing to invest. Entrepreneurs are not willing to invest, howsoever low the interest rate and howsoever much to expand the money supply, howsoever much to expand the money supply, they are not willing to invest. So therefore, in our terminology, it is not the liquidity preference schedule which is becoming horizontal. It is the investment schedule which is becoming vertical. Okay, the investment schedule which is becoming vertical because howsoever much you lower the interest rate, howsoever much, in other words, whereas the liquidity trap operates on the LM curve, the credit deadlock operates on the IS curve. Where liquidity trap says that money is infinitely elastic, this says that investment is infinitely inelastic. That's the difference. Now, there is a big logic behind this credit deadlock. See, now we don't have time to go into this, but I hope at least a few people will read this article when it appears. Okay. Now, and here I just quote from Hartree, and I also quote from Bernanke to show how the two are saying the same thing, but Bernanke, though much later, is saying it without reference to Hartree. Okay, what does Hartree say in 1933? Hartree, if the depression is very severe, enterprise will be killed. No rate of interest, however low, will tempt dealers to buy goods. Means inventory. If the borrowers anticipated a loss on every conceivable use that he could make of the money. Okay. That is what Bernanke 2003, 70 years later. In a severe depression, additional factors may come into play. Since the early 1990s, borrowers in Japan have repeatedly found themselves squeezed by disinflation or deflation, which has required them to pay their debts in yen of greater value than they expected. Borrower distress has affected the whole economy, for example, by weakening the banking system and depressing investment spending. So, what Bernanke is saying, is not very different from what Hartree is saying. But Bernanke does not seem to be aware, okay, of what Hartree has said 20 years ago. I don't blame him, because you see, in our modern system of education, okay, anything which is written before 1950, nobody reads. Okay. Now, there is one issue, and I just discussed this. One issue about wages. Okay, about wages. Now, what is wages? As you know, in US, I maintained, then if you reduce, unemployment is there, not because of anything else, but because workers are not accepting a reduction in wages. Workers are not accepting a reduction in wages. Keynes had challenged that. He said that no. Even if you could reduce the wage rate, this will have no impact on employment. Okay. Apart from the fact that it is infeasible, apart from the fact. Now, Hotray was a liberal. He was a liberal. So see his position. He's saying, I am not for wage cuts because it will create a lot of problems, okay, for wage earners, and they will have to suffer a lot of social consequences. But my intellectual position is that if the wages are cut, employment will be expanded. Okay, so he tended to agree with people and so on the theoretical usefulness of a wage cut, but he would not advocate the wage cut in policy. Okay. Now, I will conclude by noting the important differences between Hotray and Keynes. Okay, and the first difference is that Keynes was concerned with the long-term rate of interest in his liquidity investment schedule, whereas Hotray was concerned with the short-term rate. And they used to quarrel on this. Okay. And what are the quarrels? Keynes agreed that the central bank can only control the short-term rate. Short-term rate is a policy rate. But Keynes said that the short-term rate will have an immediate effect on the long-term rate. Hotray said that is not possible. Hotray said that is not possible. Please remember that they were talking when Britain was, and a lot of the world was under the gold standard. Okay, so the world there is slightly different from the world that we have now. Okay. See, the comparison between Hotray and Keynes is rendered difficult by the fact that Hotray's views more or less remain constant. You see, he lived up to 96 years. Okay, but his views more or less remain constant. Okay, but Keynes used to alter his views. Okay? I remember Dr. Brahmanand saying Keynes of the tract, and Keynes of the retired, and Keynes of the general theory, and Keynes of how to pay for the war are four distinct persons. And that is true. That is true. So when you compare Hotray with Keynes, it becomes quite difficult because Hotray and Keynes seem to be on complete agreement on track, that is Keynes' track. Hotray and Keynes, in essential differences on Keynes' three types. Fundamental differences on the general theory, and then agreement on how to pay for the war. Okay, so that's why it is a bit difficult to say comparison. But I think the main, now I don't have time to go through all these things. Okay. And this paper discusses a lot of them, but I would just like to share one point of similarity, one point of great similarity between Hotray and Keynes, and that is both of them believe that there was no automatic mechanism to restore a market economy to full employment, that government intervention was absolutely necessary. Okay, so both Hotray and Keynes agreed on this basic principle. You see, and that agreement is very, very noteworthy. Okay. Now, there is a lot more in this paper, but I am sure you see our friend Roman Fourier will be upset if I go on. And I stop here.
Clearly, rational expectations have been confirmed this morning. Professor Napsey would be happy to take questions and comments you might have, but please write them down and maybe convey them to Anuradha, will give you identification.
See, in this big room, I find it difficult to hear the question.
Uh, he's done it again for me. Right, once more. I'm trying to put together some thoughts based on what he was saying. So let's start with the abandonment of the LM curve. And let's go back to school. Okay, you have the standard graph and you have the IS curve dangling in the air now. There's nothing to intersect because the LM curve is not there. Now it turns out, he mentioned this, that a lot of the big guns in economics, I think Wilhelm Bauker is one of them, have made the case for sharply negative interest rates, policy rates. They claim that a few central banks did so 2%, 1% here, and they got cold feet. They quickly came back to positive territory. They should not have done that. They should have gone long and low and negative in the interest rates. Now, think about it. You have the IS curve going down, right? Like I said, nothing to stop it. There's no LM curve. And now we enter negative territory. Where do we stop? You have this tantalizing Q star or Y star on the right-hand side of the x-axis, which is the desired. Let's not use Nairo now. Some desired state of full employment of labor, resources, and so on. Somewhere far right on the x-axis. Now we enter negative territory, as they say, and therefore you draw a vertical line at that Y star. And that's where your negative interest rate would be along the Y-axis. That is the claim of some people who, I'm just thinking, putting together some of the thoughts that I've known over here. Now, the question that automatically arises is, can we have sharply negative interest rates as a policy too? It turns out that we can. One concept across orthodoxy and orthodoxy today has to do with the monetary transmission mechanism. The usual fiction that we teach, which is that banks have to get savings deposits and a certain proportion of those deposits as kept as cash reserves with the central bank, is not true. What is empirically well grounded is central banks, it is empirically true that key in reserves, desired reserves into the banking system. So the causal arrows move the other way to the way that and now that is the case. If it is the central bank that keys in reserves, there is a short step there to distinguish between green and brown investments. You have sharply negative rates for green investments and positive rates, penal rates for brown investments as central bank reserves policy. Asset-based reserve requirements is an article that Nachne wrote in the EPW some time ago. That is something that can very easily be revived. Having said that, of course, hardcore marketeers among you will balk at the thought that is it the government that is going to decide on investments, green and brown, but not so when it comes to distinguishing between green and brown, because that is clear to the community. Everybody knows and agrees upon what is green investment and what is brown investment. Horrendous problems of transition, of course, but there's an agreement. The only issue is here that the agenda is entirely driven by private sector interests. Monopoly capital, huge financial interests abroad, etc. And governments, central banks and governments have really taken a backseat when it comes to that. So that would have to be overturned in terms of orientation. But here is a mechanism by means of which we can, revive investment, credit, and even financial stability when it comes to that. Thank you all. Thank you, sir, for this wide-ranging review of the area, and therefore I thank you for your attention, wrapped as it was. And now I'm proceeding over to Anuradha for the next session. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
No, I just said it was not.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So this has been an extremely engaging session for us, and what a start of our seminar to have Nachne sir and Romar sir speak on the theme of the seminar. I would like to tell Nashmi sir that we refer to your book New Consensus Macroeconomics for a whole module in macroeconomics too, which I got as a legacy from Roman sir. So I always thank you both for whatever I got from this department. And also, sir, the econometrics textbook is also referred by our students. So, with this, I would like to thank you both for having accepted our invitation. And we come to the end of this session and we'll go for a short tea break and come back in 15 minutes. Will that be okay? Thank you.
पहिलं साहू आहे, मग राकेश कुमार आहे. अच्छा, ते चेअरपर्सन निरंजन राजाध्यक्ष. राकेश कुमार, राकेश कुमार ठेवा आणि राकेश कुमार. हा, आणि राजेश्वरी सेनगुप्त पण आहे. हा पण ते ठेवणार कसं? उसके साथ कोई मीटिंग नहीं था पहले राजेश्वरी से प्रभाकर साहू राकेश This was PDF. This is also PDF. So PDF is it. We do PDF for like it.
Now she is back.
ठीक है ना हो गया I just want to divine Yeah. ये सेटअप कर लिया था ये अभी हाँ ये वाली प्लेट हाँ तो कुछ इशू होता बीच में स्क्रीन से तो मैं तो ये हैंडल कर रहा था। हाँ मैंने सिर्फ ये सीक्वेंस में रखा या मैं हाँ हेलो हमारी तस्वीर हाँ सर्टिफिकेट
Hello all, I hope I'm audible to everyone. In a while, the session will resume.
वरती चाललं काय काय म्हणता हा चार बर चार
have been significantly higher in 2020 to 23 compared to entry-level compact cars, right? So the story always in India was there's a middle class India that's consuming and that's properly grown. The middle class is sort of getting shafted, and there is a very strong concentration of the upper income deciles, which I call the new economy, which is now buying luxury cars, SUVs. This is a graph that shows you housing. We had a housing boom amidst the global uncertainty over the last 2-3 years. But in the housing boom, what you see is the share of high-end residential units skyrocketed in 2023 compared to the low-end and the middle-income units. So there is this new economy that has emerged with very high income, very high spending abilities, almost dissociated from the rest of the country. Why? Who are these people? This is a phenomenon that has come up that is called the Global Capability Center, or the GCCs. What we used to know as the conventional outsourcing or offshoring. Back in mid-2000s, India was the hub of call centers, and that was the propeller of the service sector. Now that has gotten replaced by what is called GCCs, or Global Capability Centers. These are essentially units set up by multinational companies, and they do R&D work, not just IT services or tech support anymore, but 50% of the GCCs are doing business development and R&D work for companies situated in the US. More than 60% of these GCCs are headquartered in the US, which means people who are employed, these are all skills labor, who are employed in these GCCs are very tightly linked to the US labor market. And in the US, the service sector has been doing very well. So the US service sector is sort of linked to the fate of this new economy, and this is leading to the consumption of luxury goods, SUVs, high-end residential units, all of that. So when you visit these sections of the economy, you don't think that India is a poor country or India is an emerging economy. You feel India is sort of a developed country because they are sort of leading a very different lifestyle that's gotten segregated from the rest of the country. The one major link is construction. The real estate boom, the residential real estate boom, which is what I showed earlier, the construction has skyrocketed, right? So that is the link between the new economy, the old economy, and of course services exports. And the GCC market globally is $46 billion. India is 40% of the GCCs. So it's emerging as a very important technology and services hub for the rest of the world. Even more made important after the pandemic because now everybody is used to using computer and online services for consulting and business services. Now, what does the future growth outlook look like against this background? This was just the last 2-3 years of how the economy fared after the pandemic and what are the new areas sort of emerging. Let's talk about the future. It seems that notwithstanding this GCC, which is now being a very small percentage of the economy, it's roughly about 10 to 15% of GDP. Notwithstanding that, there seems to be an underlying demand problem in the economy right now. And what do you mean by the demand problem? This is a graph that shows headline inflation as well as core inflation. As in, the core inflation is CPI headline without food and fuel prices. That is an indicator of the underlying price pressure in the economy. For the longest of time, the Indian economy was also experiencing high inflation in 2023. Core inflation was elevated at 6-7%. Recently, core inflation has collapsed. It's now less than 4%, right? A slowing core inflation or a declining core inflation essentially implies demand is slowing down because this is the underlying indicator of demand, indicator of price pressure. So core inflation slowing down implies the demand is slowing down. This is a graph which shows service inflation versus goods inflation. The left hand is of the US, the right hand is India. Unlike US, what you see in the US is the goods inflation has gone down, that's the red line, but service inflation is quite high because the service sector in the US is doing very well, despite monetary policy tightening. But on the right hand side, in India's chart, what you see is both goods and services inflation have come down, right? So slowing service inflation, whenever inflation is cooling off, while it's a good thing because we don't like high prices, it is also an indicator that demand is low, right? So service inflation falling meaning service sector demand is cooling off. That's a bit problematic because remember what I said, service sector is very important for India in absence of a manufacturing boom. This is an indicator of private sector investment. So what I showed earlier was government capex. Government capex has been increasing, but the hope all throughout was if the central government starts spending a lot on capital expenditure, that was sort of crowding private sector investment. That's why they did it. But that crowding still hasn't really happened. Maybe it's too early to say, maybe we'll see this in the next 5-6 years, but not yet. This is just one graph of number of new investment projects announced in the private sector, and you see that it's actually gone down over the last 2-3 years, even as public capex as well. So private investment continues to be sluggish, hasn't really picked up substantially. That's worrisome because private investment is what is needed for creating jobs. And why is private investment not picking up? So just very briefly, a bit of context, pre-pandemic, I don't know how many of you are aware, we had a banking sector NPA problem, right? Non-performing assets in the banking sector were very high. There was what is called a twin balance sheet crisis. The corporate balance sheets were highly leveraged. The banking sector was stressed. And the net result was, if you see the left panel, investment came down and corporate debt came down. We call it deleveraging. The corporate started paying off debt and they would not take new debt. The overall problem was on the supply side. Banks were not willing to extend credit and the companies basically decided not to invest. But now, bank balance sheets are extremely healthy. All banks are well capitalized. The NPAs are down to 2-3% of total advances. There is no problem in the bank balance sheets. Corporate balance sheets are very healthy. Most corporates have made profits out of pandemic because they gain market share and commodity prices have come down. So they're perfectly poised to start investing in an economy that is growing at 7%, which means there's a lot of underlying momentum. But that still hasn't happened. Look at the capacity utilization graph on the right side. Roughly capacity utilization on average used to be 80. That is when firms start undertaking new investment to install fresh capacity or fresh plants. Even now, capacity utilization is less than 8, right? Which means that's a demand problem. There is not enough demand in the economy to trigger a private sector investment surge, so to speak. Also, when I mentioned earlier that bank credit growth has increased, and that's important because credit is what finances growth. But the caveat there is a majority of this growth in credit has come from personal loans. It's not loans to industry because investment has not taken off. So who are the banks lending to? The banks are lending to consumers like you and I. And that's problematic. If you're borrowing to consume, that means you are not earning enough. Any debt-fueled consumption is quite worrisome. So this is what I call consumerization of bank lending. Consumer loans from banks have been increasing at almost 20-25 or more than 25% over the last 2-3 years. And many of these loans are also unsecured. That's a different word. Now, what are the challenges going forward? And I'm actually going to wrap up now. Challenges are, the last 2-3 years, we got used to the government doing a lot of capex spending. And we saw a lot of infrastructure happening everywhere, right? The whole idea is, as I said, this was going to increase private investment because government by itself cannot create the number of jobs that are needed in the economy. The government is actually very small, the budget is very small, and it has a very binding fiscal constraints. In fact, as you remember the recent budget, the fiscal consolidation is very much underway with the target that fiscal deficit is going to be brought down to less than 4.5% by 2025-26, which means the government cannot be expected to do the heavy lifting of boosting demand in the economy anymore. The baton has been passed on to the private sector. We cannot expect fiscal stimulus, fiscal capex anymore. That is done. But what's happening in the private sector? Merchandise exports or goods exports are falling. Last year, merchandise exports contracted. It actually fell. Private sector investment continues to be sluggish. That is something that was expected is not going to pick up. It has picked up only slightly. So to give you an example, the total rate of growth of investments project under implementation in the private sector, right? Whatever projects is now being implemented, the average rate of growth in the last 2-3 years in nominal terms has been 13 to 14%, which is higher than what it was in the last 10 years because of this whole balance sheet crisis, investment had collapsed. But in 2008-9, this rate of growth was 33 to 34%. So even if investment has picked up a little bit, it's nowhere close to what it used to be pre-2010, right? Foreign direct investment has been falling. So we talk a lot about, I don't know whether you guys have heard of this, China plus one strategy. A lot of multinational companies are trying to move out of China. We hear of terms called French shoring and nearshoring. Because of problems in China, US MNCs are looking for alternative opportunities to set up shop. Vietnam, Thailand, Philippines, Mexico have benefited enormously from it. The expectation was that India was going to be the next China because we are that big with quote-unquote cheap labor, but that hasn't happened. Foreign direct investment has fallen in last 1 year. Last 10 years, FDI as a percentage of GDP has been stagnant at 2%. If MNCs were lining up outside India to enter and set up shop, we would have seen a big increase in FDI. That has not happened, right? And also, as I said, consumption, again, we always fall back on consumption in India when investment and exports don't work, but consumption is increasingly fueled by debt, which is not sustainable. From the policy side, not only is fiscal consolidation underway, which means while demand is slowing down, fiscal policy is tightening. That's a bit worrying. Also, monetary policy has been quite tight because real interest rate is 2%. Because as headline has come down, the RBI has kept interest rates still high because there is some inflation uncertainty. But the outcome of that is real rate is 2%, which is quite tight if demand is slowing down. But I don't want to sound all gloomy. What are the opportunities? The opportunity is that, contrary to what the perception seems to be, I think global uncertainty is diminishing. The height of uncertainty, as I said, was 2022. Now there's a lot of normalization of this uncertainty that has happened. And if anything, the US economy is expected to have a soft landing. Their inflation has cooled off significantly. Their growth hasn't been affected as badly. In fact, they're expected to see a moderate expansion. And within that moderate expansion, the service sector in the US economy is doing very well. That is good news for us. As I said, that's the GCC new economy connection. So as long as the US service sector continues to grow, our new economy or the service exports will continue to do well. And the expectation can be that this new economy becomes large enough to start pulling up demand because you have to supply these guys with all kinds of manufacturing items as well. So that is one hope that can pull up demand because manufacturing by itself is not improving no matter what we are trying, not improving in a remarkable way. But of course, the downside of that is we are putting all our eggs in one basket, right? We are only depending on service sector exports, not private investment and not goods exports. Maybe at some point private investment picks up and the returns to investing exceed the risk because of this new economy, but we don't know how long that might take. Of course, another extremely obvious risk is growing inequality. We're sort of creating an economy post-pandemic which is going this way. And this will keep on moving sharper because of linkages with the US economy. What happens to middle India and rural India? Nothing much seems to be improving there either. Right? And again, another big point here. Maybe service sector exports will continue to do well, the new economy will continue to do well, but that is not going to create the number of jobs that are required to absorb the millions who are entering the labor force every year, which is the big elephant in the room. India may be the fastest growing country in the world, growing at 7.5%, either on service exports or little bit of consumption momentum or government capex, what have you made. But jobs are not getting created nearly as adequately as we need in order to increase labor force participation, and in my opinion, is the big crisis. And of course, another small silver lining is we are done with monetary policy tightening, which means there's a lot of room for easing going forward, and that can create some room for boosting demand. But fundamentally, we need investment and exports to work in a sustainable manner. But as I said, private sector investment doesn't show signs of recovery in a big way, and that creates problems with jobs because service sector is not good enough to create all the jobs that we need. The last slide, what do we watch out for? So given this linkage with the US, which has become increasingly important for us, what should we watch out for going forward in the very short run? Watch out for how the US economy is performing, particularly how the US service sector is doing, because we are now integrally linked in the economy with that. Of course, watch out for private sector investment. That's something in India that really needs to work. As I said, there is no supply side problem anymore. The problem is demand side. And maybe there's a little bit of problem with policy uncertainty, policy instability as well, which is why the risk to investment is still higher than the returns to investment. That needs to get flipped over. Two big questions. Yes, 7.5%, or with measurement problems, maybe we are going at 6.5%, all good. But just the growth rate is not enough. In your per capita GDP is $2,500. China is at $8,000 per capita GDP. So we are a poor country. For us to really become whatever the goal may be, developed, rich, whatever it is, that by itself cannot be the goal with just a single number of GDP growth rate. We need to increase per capita GDP. We need to create jobs. So for that, India needs to grow roughly at 8-9% sustainably for the next several years. Where will that growth come from? As of now, we are not seeing that kind of a momentum in the economy, right? And most important question, where will the millions of jobs come from? It cannot be from service sector. Government capex, I think we have seen the peak of it. So what else is there that will answer these two questions? I think you all like to say wave our hand and say structural reforms and stuff like that without really understanding or defining or being concrete about what it means. So I'll just leave these questions for us to ponder about. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajeshwari, for a wonderful overview of the Indian economy. And been well below time, so you saved 2 minutes. Thanks so much. And with that, I would like to welcome Professor Sahu to speak on contours of modern macroeconomic policy in Asia. So, after that, we get 25 minutes. Thank you so much, Mr. Niranjan. Let me thank Mumbai School of Economics and Public Policy for inviting me. It's an opportunity for me to interact. So, what I'm going to do is just talk about the Indian economy. Don't respect my title because I didn't really spend time changing the title. I thought that it's fine to be there, just like that. You see, it has been very well summarized by Konrada and also by Rajeshwari, and of course, because we have been going through lot of uncertainties. In fact, severe uncertainties in the last 10 years. Whether it is, the globalization move, US-China tariff wars, which created kind of uncertainties for the trade and investment. Then you had COVID, geopolitical conflicts that led to sanctions, rise of crude prices, weaponization of trade. In fact, we have been dealing with severe uncertainties for some time. I must tell you that Indian economy, or we as policymakers, have managed the uncertainties quite well. So I'm going to first part. I'm going to tell that how India managed to observe all these uncertainties in a better way compared to most of the other nations. And the next, some of the uncertainties that we may face in the future. In the immediate and also some in the of course, like just few of my every kind of we are going to face because there are something called a known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So I will be covering those. So first thing is just look at, you see, some parts Rajeshwari has covered so well. I think I'm lucky that we can talk after you. So I'm not going to repeat some of those. So when we stand, as an economic potential, the revival is almost like 8.2% average growth rate was pandemic. When the world is growing almost half of that. External sector stability, we do have like $620 billion, which is equal to cover something like 10 months of imports. More or less, we are very stable. The current account balance it is under control. If you look at the finance sector stability, credit growth is in double digits. The PSUs, as already mentioned, the PSUs, the balance sheets have been improved substantially. Last year, the data I remember 1 lakh crore profit. So that's quite huge. Capital acquisition is close to 16, where the requirement is 9. So we are doing very well when it comes to financial sector stability. I'm sure my colleague Mr. Kumar will cover some part of it. The fiscal stability, in fact, it's one of the achievements of this government, particularly the last 10 years. They have made the fiscal accounting much more transparent and always, in fact, kind of adhere to fiscal consolidation. If we look at the primary deficit, which means a lot, it was 1.1 in 2014 and it came down to 0.1. But of course, we had the pandemic and then we had to go for fiscal stimulus and they ended up. But fiscal deficit target, it's already mentioned that will receive something like 4.5% by 2025-26. Price stability, I think after this inflation target, it will more or less achieved. Of course, what happened during the pandemic, a lot of liquidity by the developed countries, kind of lot of liquidity that came to the developing countries. There are two sides that impacted the price level. There were disruptions to the supply chain, at the same time, lot of liquidity heading the goods. That is where we ended up with a higher inflation. But I think it has come down to almost to normal level, and monetary policy is going to be lower. When it comes to the investment, I completely agree with that story, that it is one of the main things for almost last 30 years. If we go by national account statistics data, that is something like 34.6%, the investment ratio in 2011-2012. If we go by WDI data in 2007, it was 37%. Almost, private sector immediately kind of, reacted to the global financial crisis. It fell down by 40%, it was 10.4, and it came down, it's 14.4, it came down to 10%. And then private sector, like the household sector, it also started going down, but not immediately after the global financial crisis. It started from 2013-14. When then it's a construction sector, basically, some of the companies collapsed, possession was delayed, and then doing balance sheet crisis, the valuation of the housing sector was not good enough. It was increasing something like 20 to 25% from 2008. It started falling down to 7 to 8%. In certain pockets, in fact, there was glut in the house market. So, in fact, the investment slowdown, one of the main reasons is slowdown in construction investment in the housing sector by almost 5% of the whatever. But however, the good thing is that the investment in the housing sector, particularly construction sector, has started going up. That's a good news. So more or less, there is a revival, not to the peak point we achieved before global financial crisis, but we are doing well, and it started to kind of reach 35%. Increase in capex. One of the best things of this, last 10 years, I can say that the capex, which used to be 2.3 lakh crore, it was less than, I think, 1.5% or so. It has increased 4 folds to 10 lakh crores. And this budget actually, the last year, it was 11 lakh crores. So almost like 5% of GDP. Basically, the belief is from the supply side measures that public investment, as Kanishwar very nicely mentioned, that okay, we are reaching a peak, and I don't know how long government can really continue pushing this demand. But the whole idea is like, okay, it has highest multiplier, close to 3, and it would crowd in private investment. Maybe I think that little bit of pickup that is happening in the private sector investment, I hope it will continue. Then increase in digital transaction, okay, people may have a lot of points to criticize the demonetization, but it's one of the kind of turning point that led to digitalization, and it is huge. In fact, India is a role model. And it leads to formalization of the economy, efficiency of the policies, and all that. It becomes much more effective. What are the offers to this? On an average, I can say that Indian economy is on a very strong platform. In fact, it is in the sweetest spot, probably in the world economy. It's not only the fastest rising, the economy, the top economy. The way I look at it, the UNP very recently got out something. If China's population would be going down by close to 65 to 70% by 2050. The world is aging. India's average is 29, and it's very aspirational society. Everybody wants to do better. Right? If we look at the Europe, it's something like close to 42, Japan 47, US is close to 40. So when the whole world is thinking India is the only continent, or one country, which has something like 900 million working with population, where no other country or continent has it. So India could be the source of supply of labor force to the rest of the world, provided we make use of that. The demographic dividends, the point what I like the most, services sector, something like services are output themselves, but their inputs as well. What are the services? Travel, transportation, business services, commercial services, banking, this, that. All these are output, but they are used as input in the process if the economic activities are taking place. Somebody is going for traveling, transportation, contract, and all that. So that is where this manufacturing that has to come out to provide jobs to the millions of young labor force that are entering every year with limited education or skills. I don't think they are capable of getting the benefits of the service sector. So that is where I think that is a structural issue we are dealing with. But coming to the opportunity, the demographics or the most favorable demographic composition we have is the best, probably the best asset we have. So let's get rich before we get old. Because we'll be reaching something like average age of 39 by 47. And any big country, you see, look at China. It's the early 80s to 2010, 2011, they had this favorable demographic composition. They made use of it and they became where they are today. I think the next 25 years we need to capitalize that. It's a huge market. We have the manpower, we have the endowment. The point made by the okay. Most of these manufacturing giants, they are leaving the space because increasing cost of production. They don't have that kind of endowments they had 25 years ago. Where are they going? They are going, whether it is Vietnam, Bangladesh, Mexico, Indonesia, Philippines nowadays. But this economy is just very small, very little market to offer, and the endowments are very limited. India is like a very big country, it has the endowment, it's a big country and manpower, right? So that is, I think we need to seriously think how to get it. And I can only say that for some time I'm part of the government, almost for a year. So the kind of interest by the tenants or the companies, of course, some are coming, get our own but some are genuinely serious about the Indian economy, that the way they see that India is not only, from the market or economics point of view, it is the only stable place for the next maybe few decades to come. So there are lots of interest and the real business is taking place. So I'm very hopeful there that India is there. So now the point is that we are on a very strong wicket, whether it is external sector, fiscal policy and all that. They're doing high. But it has not happened by default. It's a very systematic policy initiatives or the policies that government of India has taken. Just look at the growth rate we achieved. Before pandemic, it was more than 7%. If you take the pandemic, including pandemic, even it is around 6.5% over that 10 years. And it has not happened when the world economy has been kind of slowing down. The world growth that has been slowing down. There are a lot of uncertainties starting from geopolitics to the anti-globalization and all, US-China tariff war. We have done well because some of these policies, what you see is the first row talks about the key government reforms, whether it is asset quality review that led to bad loan scale or improvement in public sector banks' balance sheets. IGC, which along with all others, it led to increase in perception based ease of doing business. But of course, these are my personal views. I must tell that though we have increased ease of doing business ranks by 60 or 70%, it has not reflected in the investment rate. Okay, there is a revival by almost 60% from the peak, but still we are yet to reach the previous peak. Formalization of finance, demonetization and PhD, of course, actually can make the whole economy formal, and of course, now the kind of revenue related. It's another debate whether we should have more resources from the indirect tax or direct tax. So I'm not getting into that. NBFC support, now there is substantial improvement and NBFCs are back into the business, which is absolutely necessary for the domestic demand and also the financing the farmers. Public sector mergers, recapitalizations, there is improvement in the balance sheet, profits, and also double-digit credit rate in last 1 year, 1.5 years onward. Atmanirbhar Bharat package, lot of funding opportunities, along with the fiscal stimulus of 4%, that led to immediate revival. I think 5.8% negative growth rate, and we came to 9.2, and after that 7.6. Really, resilience of the Indian economy. And managing price stability, that point I've already made. Now, if I have to categorize it, what are the big policies that led to stable foundation, macro foundations we have, or whatever we have achieved in 10 years? So let me just. Oh, I thought this is what okay. The first one is fiscal discipline with cleaner budget goals. In fact, the credit goes to this government that all these off-budget items and all are part of the budget documents now. Fiscal discipline overall, except during the pandemic period, government managed the fiscal consolidation part. Major source to capex. I show you a graph. I have something like inflation. It has been already price stability through interest rate target, they have managed most part of it on an average. Last 10 years, the average inflation rate is I think 4.9. At the average I think 4.9 or less than that. And sector stability, I think if you look at the banking sector, major part of it, the NPAs that have gone down almost close to 3%. Increase in balance sheets, revival in credits. We had difficult phase before even pandemic and during the pandemic, but things are much better. I will leave it to Mr. Kumar to cover the financial stability. I think in fact it's going to talk on that. Revival of the investment, that is one of the things which makes me very happy because I've been quite concerned about the investment. Whichever growth theory is, whether it is exogenous, endogenous, institutional growth theories, in whatever dimensions you focus on growth theories, ultimately it comes down to one thing that's one of the major drivers of the growth investment, and that's private investment. Why so private investment? Because they are what you call the most smart, rational economic agents. They read on the ground and they forecast and they can foresee the way you are going to do it. So that was not happening. Of course, there are many other reasons we can always cite. Before pandemic, I think the lack of aggregate demand, that was one of the reasons that really mattered. I can always speak on the component wise, whether it's the consumption, which was kind of slowing down, investment anyway was down, the exports which was not happening in 2011. The export was something like 300 billion in 2019. It was we are not doing that on that. So if you look at all the other components from the demand side, we are not doing it, and lack of aggregate demand that was one of the reasons also for investment not to recover. But I'm happy that the task is digitization. Digitization. I think it has lot more positive implications. In fact, what we call delivery of services, direct benefit transfers, bringing transparency. Really the delivery of services to the real people, the last mile for the it's much more effective to the digitization. Financial inclusion, Jan Dhan Yojana, everybody or every household is having an account. It's quite an achievement, and the government is kind of very effective using it for the delivery of services. Cross-border manufacturing, here the results are mixed. Make in India, Startup India, Digital India, the Startup India, I can say the figures, the investment increased by 15 times. The incubator, we have done amazingly well when it comes to, certain sections of that. Or certain sectors we have done, whether it is electronics, we started doing well, automobiles, pharmaceuticals, information technology. Some of the sectors in manufacturing we have done very well. But in some of the sectors which are very crucial, we are yet to really capitalize, labor intensive sectors. Somewhere that's something actually, most of the labor intensive sectors, food, leather, textile, those were the sectors where we had really good hold over the last few decades we have lost it. I think that is something we need to focus. Ease of doing business, overall, it's not only on consumption-based brands. That's so. There is ease of doing business, and there is serious effort. I can only say, being part of the government, there are always efforts and very serious efforts to ensure that things are much more transparent, efficient, and it's kind of creating a very stable and conducive environment for every economic agent, whether it's investor. But there are issues when it comes to the lower level bureaucracy, because even today dealing with the higher level bureaucracy, those are very proactive. It's much more easier than dealing with somebody that you go to block level officers and say that I need this, but I would make this. It's not easy. Or getting the utilities or the connections, the simple clearances on the ground or what you call at a very low level. I think it's time to take the reforms to that level. Renewed focus on international economic cooperation, if you remember, like almost 10 years or so in between, because there was a perception, and of course, in some ways people can justify it, that all these free trade agreements we signed did really lead to positive relations. In fact, we ended up having higher deficit with these trading partners. That is where almost a decade it was We are not moving on international economic cooperation, but we started, all this, 2 or 3 years we have signed India. And then 4 and 5 we are very close. India, I think we are about to sign India. EFTA we are about to sign, we are signed India. So there is a renewed focus on international economic cooperations. What we are, it certainly helps that, okay, you can be part of the global value chain. See, even today, almost like 80% of the world trade happens through global value chain. Unfortunately, we have not kind of succeeded in part of the global value chain. This is one of the ways to be part of the larger production network or global value chain. Focus on technology, lot more initiatives that have been taken, vibrant ecosystems. So these are some of this. What you can categorize, these are some of these major policy initiatives during last 1 decade that led to stable growth, that led the Indian economy to tackle all this kind of uncertainties that we have gone through. Yeah. And when it comes to India tackling what you call all these crises, not only during last 1 decade, or even last 3 decades, India has always managed to kind of handle any crisis in a much better way compared to other developing countries. Let me give you an example. East Asian crisis. What happened during East Asian crisis? It's basically the banks, the agents, the financial institutions during this in East Asia. They started lending substantially, or they started lending extensively. And of course, without much regulation, that could be kind of a case of crony capitalism if we really get deep into that. And these were all offshore funding, and it's a unhedged, it's basically very high risk, unhedged foreign or offshore funding that led to increase in credit. And ultimately, kind of because they were following fixed exchange rates, higher rate of interest, so foreign investors were finding it much easier and not to get higher return. So they invested. But then there was a crisis, lack of competitiveness, and all of a sudden there was run on the bank in the kind of run on foreign exchange reserves and all this concept about. But what happened in Indian case? You see, here when it comes to, in fact, this global financial crisis, though it was happened was collapse of there was a housing bubble, that's collapse of mortgage, debts, impact, financing that instrument was sold outside to the investors. No, ultimately, if I summarize, it's not only this global crisis, global financial crisis. Some of the reasons were like speculative investment, structural weakness, and lack of regulation, where actually we scored very high. When it comes to the regulations or due diligence, I think we have been doing very, very well. And of course, complex financial products, the financial innovation, or what you call the complicated financial products, like the way it was done during just before the global financial crisis in 2005, the financial 2006 actually, but financial crisis happened 2 years later. But because of very stable and the regulation, sound regulations or the financial institutions we have, particularly the credit goes to the Reserve Bank of India, that we are, our process has been always very gradual, and what we call checks and balances were taken into account. That is where we managed all these crises. We never really got badly affected. It's not that we didn't get affected. This crisis happened. Even during the global financial crisis happened, 3.5% of the GDP, we had to use as a stimulus rate. But some of the reasons why or how India managed all this, it's a regulated capital account, flexible exchange rate regimes. So whenever there is capital grows, of course, active intervention by the RBI to kind of for stable movement and all that we did it. Insulated banking system. So my point is that we have managed all these major crises, and even during the pandemic, I think we have done very well. Now, there is no time, just I'll take 5 minutes to summarize because this is exactly the point I wanted to highlight. But before coming to this, see, these are some of the things I feel that we need to be very careful about. One is the geopolitical crisis that is happening. Fortunately, these uncertainties are getting normal. The world is moving and it's on the kind of this geopolitical crisis. But still, look at what is happening, the Red Sea crisis and Russia-Ukraine crisis. In case of this Red Sea crisis, almost 80% of the trade going to the EU that is passing by, and there is kind of substantial increase in transit time, that substantial increase in trade cost, and it is also creating India's exports to the EU. And that's a bit of concern. This is very immediate one. Hopefully, things will stabilize. Russia-Ukraine war, what it led to increase in the crude price rise, and also in some sectors, fertilizers and wheat and all that. But somehow we managed it because of RBI's active involvement. There is increase in, of course, as a response to increase in policy rates in developed countries and also to the prices, we have gone for the right monetary policy. We have managed well. Fiscal measures also come that's getting to stabilize this price. Then the second point, which worries me for some time, almost last decade or more, the world has been getting very protectionist. Everybody wants to grow at any cost. In fact, 2004 to 2024, if you look at WTO, the number of SPS and TBT barriers, which are called non-tariff barriers, has increased from 950 to 6,000. Some of the numbers are given. In fact, last time, probably after global financial crisis, what has happened is the world trade is higher than the world growth. And it is very well proven, both theoretically and empirically, that increase in cross-border trade has expanded opportunities for the developing and lower income countries. And that led to reduction in poverty and an increase in standard of life. Because just look at it, it's an opportunity for the developing and HPs to be to effectively participate. But what is happening is the world trade has been growing. It's almost denying opportunities for countries like India. So that is something worries because the trade and investment go hand in hand. So the uncertainty is to trade also that led to slowdown of investment and foreign direct investment and MNCs are the most easier and what you call the best way to get technology part of the global value chain, get access to the export market and all that. But that has been going down. If you look at the data, 88 to the developing countries has been going down. Yeah, it's the only exception that in India case I summarize disagree that yes, if they are percentage to GDP is almost same, but the base has become very big. We are almost getting 60 to 70%. Last 1 year it has slowed down. But before that, I think India is the only country which has been getting higher and higher FDI compared to others. Yeah. The structural imbalance, this point it has been already made. See, what has happened in India is we didn't follow the linear growth phase theories, like moving from primary to secondary to tertiary. It was predominantly agricultural economy for 90s, and all of a sudden we shifted to service-led growth without significant or substantial increase in manufacturing. So that is why even today, 45% of the people here in agriculture, they cannot take part in the services. And our manufacturing sector, the share, is more or less constant. The 15 to 16%. The one thing we need to do is we need to really shift major chunk of the labor force that they are there in agriculture to the manufacturing. And here the manufacturing has to be labor intensive manufacturing. You see, how can one sector like textile that can sustain 7% growth rate for Bangladesh, two sectors like footwear, headwear and leather, that can sustain, of course they have done well in the electric vehicle, the others in case of Vietnam. You see, India, if we need to focus on top or 5 labor-intensive sectors so that we can have the. So why I'm telling this? There is a structural imbalance. Somewhere, it's not my view, but it's not my personal view. I fear that we should not get into the trap of 7 to 8,000 per capita income. Something like what has happened to the Latin American. And part of the vision document that's going to be released soon, we are projecting 9.1% in foreign US dollar growth rate for next 25 years. That is 30 trillion we are going to reach. But that goal, reaching of 18,000 per capita income, that is going to the low income ceiling for the high income countries. That is where we are calling it Viksit Bharat. If we have to reach there, we need to really make our growth process much structured and balanced by focusing on labor-intensive manufacturing. Otherwise, it will be a very different one. The last is the lack of, just for the last one. That's something worries, and this is one of the uncertainties. I somehow feel that failure of world order, only with this World Health Organization, UN, IMF, World Bank, looks like nobody's in charge. The developed countries, when they wanted to go for stimulus, they could print money of $5 trillion, lot of money injecting capital market, going up that inflation. When they could want, like, they just, what it led to is hyperinflation, and they had to go for tight monetary policy. Now there is a capital outflow from the developing countries. It has so much of implications for the developing countries. Foreign exchange, even if you think of that more than 50 countries are kind of dead straight, dead trapped. They're suffering. So this kind of uncertainties, uncertainties are much more today because somewhere these multilateral organizations are not having the consensus to govern the world economy. And the last one, this conflict of technologies, this point has been made by all, but I think so. You see, all this artificial intelligence, the robotics, all that are happening. We need to be very, very careful how to use it, to leverage it, or get prepared, because most of this back office work that all we are doing, they are on the threat. So this frontier technology, that's one thing that may be a big uncertainty. And that's last two slides. Let me just take half a minute to summarize. That's something we need to be very careful. There are two problems. One is, see, all of a sudden, developed countries, they started focusing a lot on climate actions. IRA chips by US, CBAM by European countries. What happens is it's carbon intensive growth. They continued for decades. They have become the developed countries. Now, so much of pressure, and you're part of the world economy, you cannot do without it. Now, the kind of investment requirement, it's something like 2.4 billion by 2030 for the whole world, but in our case, there are different estimates, but something like $300 billion we need to spend every year, or incremental 50 to 100 billion every year, just to ensure that we are following our commitments, or we are following the commitments we are giving. And that kind of resources are not there. And India being a developing country, we cannot run a current account deficit more than 2%. Where do we get funds? Because we have our developmental priorities, and government has limited resources, and private investment has not really come up, in this sector. So there are a lot of good and positive improvement. So that is something that investment financing requirement for the climate actions, both for mitigation and adaptations, are used. That is something which scares me, because the world is getting together and we need to find out the worst place. The second one is because the climate change is a reality. I'm sure everybody can feel it. And because of that, I'm giving some statistics. The number of natural calamities and the kind of economic loss that has been happening. And India is very prone. You see, I belong to a state which is very prone to natural calamities. They have done very good. What is right? So that's another thing, we need to prepare ourselves for disaster management. The government spending has done quite a lot, but we need to be very, very careful. Which is two things which might create uncertainties. One part is the financing part, which will affect our access to the market and all that. The second part is we need to be really prepared to take care of the kind of natural, this kind of disasters that may be an outcome of this climate. I'll stop. I will be very happy to take questions. Sahu for a very detailed overview of macro policy and the age of uncertainty. Let me invite Mr. Rakesh Kumar, uncertainty and macro. I try to that's what I'm asking. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for organizing. I would like to congratulate our technical committee for holding the seminar and the theme is perfectly apt and timely for discussing some of the uncertainties global like domestic economy is facing. And I don't want to come between the lunch and my lecture so much, so I'll be very quick on what I have to say about macroeconomic policy and we are facing Reserve Bank and the uncertainty emanating from global and domestic economic environment. So the first slide is providing the key mega trends which we have seen in the recent years and their implication on our macroeconomic policy, because I'm not going to use these are my personal views, so I would say that these are not the views of the Reserve Bank of India, these are my personal views, and I have avoided putting especially the monetary policy of central bank in that. Just I would say these are the macroeconomic issues and for all macroeconomic stabilizing policy. So the first one I would like to mention here is the financial interconnectedness, which we have seen all over the years. The globalization and the global financial network has become very strong, even if there is a deglobalization trend happening in the trade, but the financial channel has become more integrated. And that has also got a lot of capital for our emerging market economies, which are considered as capital scale. On the other hand, it has also some negative impact, unintended impact, as we have seen in the latest monetary policy cycle. So this is one of the reasons for uncertainty, as we need to be more prepared for the unwanted or unwarranted shock in from global environment, and especially transmitting through our financial network, financial channel. The second most or rather important issue, which I would say is the geopolitical conflict and rising geofragmentation, which we have been seeing all over. And this has accentuated after the year 2015, and the most landmark, development in this regard was the Brexit. After that, there is a quite increase in the geopolitical conflict. The third, as Professor Sahu also mentioned, that the consequence of climate change. Climate change is a reality, as we know, and we need to deal with it. Even if we don't have resources, we have to manage, or we have to face the brunt of this environment change. It will have stunning impact on productivity, and it may also cause, food insecurity. The fourth issue which I would like to mention here is about the fiscal headroom and elevated debt levels. This is what we have been highlighting in our financial stability report time and again, and we are not the one who is taking. It is mainly, you will see it is there all over in the global developments, in the GFSR and World Economic Outlook. The global debt levels are at very high level, and especially when the monetary policy is on the tightening mode, this debt servicing is one of the major concerns for many emerging market economies. And the last one, just I'm not a very techy guy, but still just to contextualize my presentation with the theme of the seminar, the AI, generative AI technology. I have also tried to include a section on that, and it covers broadly the impact of AI technology and some of the references which I have taken from the recent IMF paper. They have tried to look at some of the data, which possible implication that it will have on the labor market. The first slide is just I'm trying to put this in context that how the uncertainty has been. I hope the people on the back will not be able to see it, but clearly what it is coming is based on text mining of the data
Now we have the uncertainty index. Earlier we were using global policy uncertainty, but this is more about the uncertain economic environment. And using the text mining, they have made this index for the world and aggregated by GDP weighted average. And there we can clearly see that uncertainties are often, leading to or often driven by both global macro and non-macroeconomic factors. In fact, political development and debate discourse has contributed more to this type of uncertain environment or sharp spikes in the index. We can see clearly after 2015, there is a rise in uncertainty. Reason could be varying from geopolitical to even COVID-19, which nobody would have anticipated. And then the Ukraine war followed or in tandem with the rising policy rate by advanced economies. And there I just try to make a correlation. Correlation is a very simple exercise, but still I took the advantage of the simple exercise. There are so many sophisticated ways to measure spillover. These are the correlation of these bilateral correlation between these economies, 10 major economies, and how the spillover or uncertainty has moved or they are correlated with each other. And I found that correlation has gone up after 2015 that reflects the rising uncertainty and the spillover transmission. And in this slide, I'm trying to portray that why financial interconnectedness is important, and how it is going to make our policymakers' life difficult. The major channel through which financial flows are making the financial condition transmission. That capital flows are the mover, and then the destabilizing impact of monetary policy, which we have seen in the last rate hike cycle, has led to tightening of financial condition in India and driven by global factors. India also, irrespective of our domestic business cycle, a lot of financial stability consideration were on guard, and then we have to increase our interest rate. And the middle chart is very interesting chart that I have borrowed from IMF, and they are showing that as the interest rates were increasing in US, and the uncertainty and other macro or global developments have pushed up yields in other bond markets in emerging markets, and how the bond markets yields have the spread between the US and the advanced emerging market bond market yields are showing a very significant impact of this rising interest rate, Ukraine war, and even earlier the global financial crisis. So this is what is the how financial integration is providing the scope for global spillover, which policymakers in India have to deal with. Then the second point which I would like to mention about is the geopolitical conflict and geo-economic fragmentation. As Professor Sahu was mentioning about the non-tariff measures taken by so many advanced and emerging market economies during the last 10 years, clearly there is a shift in the global trade, and the deglobalization can be characterized as started from 2010. Earlier, we had seen a phase of hyper-globalization that started sometime from 1992 to 2008 by end of the crisis. But this reversed completely, and we have seen the trade has stagnated. Trade as a percentage of GDP has stagnated, and only we can see some increase after the impact after this war in Europe. So commentators are saying this is not something sharp increase, which reflects the price impact. Maybe the deflators in the export side are increasing faster than the deflators in GDP. So that is what is maybe showing uptick. Otherwise, we can clearly say that it has remained flat. Now the next question is economic stability. We need to be sanguine about it, about the trade performance. I feel that deglobalization is still, it is also a phase in the economic, history. I don't think that this deglobalization will stay for long. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is the cost of deglobalization is very high. If you see back in 1970s when there was a Cold War era, trade as a percent of GDP was something like 20-25%, while you see in the latest period it is around 60%. So if at all any deglobalization will happen, share of trade will come down in GDP. Definitely, it will have a adverse impact on GDP growth. Secondly, the way global economy and the demography is changing all over the world. Like advanced economies are going to face the aging population. China is also going to have a different type of aging. India on the one side is on the demographic boom. So this changing demography, changing labor skills, and this type of development will definitely will not allow completely deglobalization of economy. Maybe the globalization will be more into the regional blocks, which we have seen in the recent period. People are aligning with a group of blocks rather than going for full-fledged earlier global order. So possibly this type of wave will continue, but I'm quite hopeful that deglobalization will not be there. So similarly, uncertainty emanating from this geopolitical conflict and geoeconomic fragmentation will be transitory in nature. Then another important issue which everyone is around the world, both in academia as well as in policy, we are facing with this changing climate issue and sustainable finance. Sustainable finance I'm trying to touch upon here because we are from the Reserve Bank of India. We have established a sustainable finance group in our department of regulation, and they are taking care. Recently, if you go to our website, in the day before yesterday, they have put circulars to all the banks and financial entities to disclosure of finances or credit to the climate sensitive sectors and products. So this is one major problem which we are facing in India. We don't, not only in India, outside world also, there is a lack of data. There is no clarity on data, what is green and what is brown, and then this limitation of data is also making us putting us back on doing some meaningful analysis for developing some scenarios. And if you see globally, these are left side charts are from IMF World Economic Outlook, and they are showing that still the investment in fossil fuels are staying at higher levels. This suggests that still there is a gestation period of 25 to 30 years. That means investors or these companies are thinking that still fossil fuel demand will be there for another 25 to 30 years. It's not that easy to supplement. Although there is some increase in the green fuel investment also. Then on the right hand side, the carbon tax, I would like to mention here, we did some internal work also, which we didn't publish, but there we were trying to look at the impact of carbon tax. This is not the border tax now. After 2026, EU will be doing a border adjustment tax for imports from India and others. And India, being one of the largest exporter to EU, will face steel exports, and our iron and steel industry will definitely going to face the issue. And as per market estimates, there will be some 5 to 6% increase in the cost of import if they're going to have this carbon tax. But the other important issue for India is that our carbon intensity of industry is very high compared to some of our competitors. So there can be some flip, or we may face some risk of redistribution of exports which were coming from India to EU towards the other competitors. So that way it has some implication for trade. Whereas the right hand side chart is showing the current level of carbon tax which some countries have imposed, or they are in the pipeline. They have models that they will protect. So carbon tax is definitely one very important instrument which one should be maybe in future in India also maybe also going. Although it has a lot of political implications, that carbon tax will definitely curtail the impact of climate change by preventing or making carbon intensive sectors or intensive more costlier. So this will discourage some amount of carbon emission in India. But the issue here is another that when we look at from the financial stability angle, so this climate stress test is done for physical and transition risk. So physical risks are something as our colleague said that Odisha is very much prone to cyclone. So some states or some regions in India they will be highly prone to climate event. So they may be more affected. Whereas the transition risk we know that where the policies will be taken and how the transition of those policies going to impact those sectors. Maybe some sectors will benefit and some sectors will be adversely affected. So this type of uncertainty will definitely affect the output and the credit deliveries as well as NPA levels. So that is also one important issue which we should be facing in another 3 to 5 years. Then in my another important issue which I saw that after this global financial crisis, there was some deglobalization, but in terms of fiscal expenditure, governments were always on the upper path, and that became even more bigger during the pandemic period of 2020 all over world. A lot of government expenditures were made for subsidized providing things on subsidy basis, and recovery from the pandemic adversities of COVID-19 pandemic. But what has happened after this rising increase in monetary policy by advanced economies? Every country in the world they have to increase their interest rate to align with inflation targets. This debt servicing cost has gone up. So already at very high elevated level of debt, and with rising interest rates, the debt service burden has gone up, and a lot of countries, we have seen the example of Sri Lanka, and we know that in Pakistan also, some of our neighboring South Asian countries, they are also on the brink of default. So similarly, the case with many African countries. So this issue is also very important, not only for these poorer economies or lower income economies, even for the middle income and advanced economies also. If you see the right-hand side chart, you will see that one of the primary, simple way of debt sustainability is looking at the interest rate and growth differential. So with the slowing global growth, slowing growth potential, and rising elevated interest rate environment, this gap is becoming narrower and becoming unfavorable for servicing of this debt. So this is one important issue which I would like to mention, that all the policy makers, fiscal policy and monetary policy, they are very much prone to this type of environment, and especially given the fact that globally the population will be aging and the kind of geopolitical conflicts which we are seeing now, countries' expenditure will be on defense will be going up. So with all these things, the debts are likely to go up further. So some of these scenarios are given by BIS and IMF. You can check upon this and have your take on that. Then I'm coming to the section for AI. This is what I have collected from the IMF papers, and it says that basically that the entire world from almost 40% of global environment is exposed to AI, and this exposure they have made collaborating with the International Labour Organization. They have systematically done the analysis and look at each sector by sector in the labor and which are more exposed to AI technology. And they found that advanced economies are much prone, and because the kind of cognitive skill or the kind of workforce they are engaged in or sectors they have dominated is which is very much AI can affect. Whereas in countries like EMEs, the impact is slightly lower, And India is, you can see on the right hand side, they have done for India also. It is slightly lower. AI exposure is 26%. And within the labor market, they have also identified sectors like finance and customer services, even research also and analysis. They are all very much prone to AI. But definitely, I would say that academicians sitting here and those who are doing the original work, they are not that much, going to get affected with AI, because AI can only, help in, generating some which is already a pattern which is there in the data, but not something which is originality, which we are expected or we do see in academic world. Now the second slide, this is providing an image of ranking for AI fitness of countries. There we can clearly see India is well prepared, not well prepared, well above the EMEs. Advanced economies are much more prepared compared to EMEs. And the preparedness for AI is relevant. Why? From the point of view that if they are prepared to deal with AI, artificial intelligence, then they are in a position to utilize as well as safeguard their industry from this, rampant increase in AI technology. So AI preparedness movement is very important, and we need to be prepared. And they concluded that long-term productivity gains from AI are likely. However, during the transition phase, job replacement and changes in income distribution could have substantial political and macroeconomic implications, which I 100% agree. And in another 4 to 5 years, definitely we are going to face, as per government says, that AI could disrupt up to 300 million jobs worldwide within the next few years. So this is one, source of uncertainty which we would all be, grappling with, directly or indirectly. Now I'm coming to the second part of my presentation. Since I'm coming from Reserve Bank of India, I'll be very quick on this part. But since I'm coming from Reserve Bank of India, I would like to mention some of the state of economy. Although Rajeshwari Madam has covered very nicely, and even Professor Tao has covered quite well. So these are the macro numbers which we all see, and we see this clearly 7+ growth for 3 years, which is definitely, is a very good putting India in a sweet spot in the global landscape. And we always write that global investors are also showing their interest in India. So I think India has a lot of, stable growth outlook. Whereas on the inflation front, we can see clearly now, after having a toss for the last 1.5 years or so, now MPC inflation forecast is something around 4.5%. So I do agree with in the morning session, Professor Nachi said about the price gap. Inflation targets are mentioned, or generally everywhere the banks are in terms of percentage changes. So we are happy to say that now the percentage change is stable or lower. But whatever price increase has taken place, I am not sure whether that has reversed, because people are still, facing problem all over the world that prices have gone up so high. But at least on inflation target, we can clearly see that 4% is, something which is a comfortable level. But over time, the stability of inflation in the range definitely adjusts the price gap also, which I would take. The price gap, if at all we take it as a target, I think it should be taken as a medium-term target. Then this slide, I'm trying to highlight that some other people have not highlighted. I would like to mention here that India's strong performance is also driven by the improvement in external sector performance, and we see our reserves are quite high. Our exchange rate was stable in the last 1 year, and then the external vulnerability indicators, it is especially for the students who are sitting on the back, they should be looking at RBI publication, and these are the external debt indicators, and then we cover some of these debt indicators with our reserve position and short-term debt and GDP. So these are the indicators which suggest that we are at quite comfortable level if you compare it with 2013 when during the taper tantrum we had really, we were considered as one of the fragile five. Sectoral flow of credit, as my previous participants have, previous speakers have also mentioned that that credit growth is very high in certain sectors. So because of that, we have taken some macroprudential measures also, especially in the unsecured lending, in the personal loans. And banks have also made changes in their strategy for, not investing in, not providing credit in agri or industry, but rather on personal loan, because the NPs are also very low. So one good point about, if at all credit is going to personal loan, the NPA levels are lower in that, especially the housing loan, which is the major dominant, constituent of personal loan. Then these are some of the banking system snapshot. Yeah. My previous speakers have also covered that financial system is stable, and we see our NPAs are also at record low level. Although some people have criticized or they would say that our NPAs are low, but recovery is not that strong, or sometimes we have done the restructuring of our bad loans. That is one exercise which is good, that we should clean up our assets also, that I would say. And secondly, I would like to mention here that the slippage ratio is also coming down. Slippage ratio, what we call it now as defaults, that is also going down. So that shows that new NPAs are also not coming up in the system. And this is the last slide, and second last slide. This we do the systemic risk survey, and some of the participants are also here in our conference today. So there we can see that this we published in our financial stability report, and we try to capture the assessment of panel of experts about the possible risk or financial stability risk scenarios for the economy. And in the last survey, they have said 1/4 of the respondents reported that their confidence in the global financial system has declined over the last 6 months. This suggests that the conference what we are having today on is, perfectly, perfectly fine, and the topic is fine, and the timing is also relevant, that the confidence or uncertainty is rising from the global front. This is my last slide. Just I would like to mention here that policymakers need to be vigilant and nimble. Uncertainty may prompt staggered policy action, as my fellow commentators have also mentioned that a lot of challenges and risks are there. So we need to be, when uncertainty is high, our policy action also will be not very quick, and must be staggered and gradual and guarded. Geo-economic fragmentation, I would say it's a phase, it's not an end of globalization. Climate change is a reality. We need to carefully craft our policies to adhere to the climate requirement, net zero emission, as well as the transition risks which are there. Fiscal policy need to rebalance again and to make buffers for future, to deal with any future uncertainty. And last but not the least, the technological changes are necessary for raising productivity. So sometimes I'm not from that old generation, but I could still see in the Reserve Bank of India also, when there was a computerization initially, a lot of banking sector, there was so much of protest that why you need computers in the bank, or it will lead to a lot of job loss. So I can relate the same issue of computerization with this new AI technology. So I feel that the world economy or the humankind will see this transition also, and it will be in long term good for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for this uncertainty and application policy. I don't think we have time for questions, but I'm quite sure we'll lunch. If anybody has any questions, they can go. I'd like to hand it over.
So the great session. Actually, most of the slides are too good actually. All our students should go through them. We also have an Indian economy component days. Mr. Ko can gain from it. I'll not hold on further, but we'll come back quickly so that we cover up for the time that we've lost in this session. So let's try to be as quick as possible, maybe by 2:20 or 2. Yeah, 2:10? Yeah, 2:10.